What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Echoes of Elsewhere, the podcast about abandoned places, forgotten stories, and the quiet truths we uncover in the spaces left behind. I am your host, Courtney Autumn. I am here solo today, and I figured now that we're halfway through season 4, which has been packed with incredible conversations with some really amazing explorers, I want to do something a little different because this episode is less about the places we explore and more about why we explore in the first place. We're going to dive into the beauty of what's left behind, not just the thrill, not just the stories, and not just the beauty of decay, but the deeper meaning underneath it all. The parts of urbex that have less to do with abandoned places and more to do with memory, grief, connection, perspective, and the strange ways that exploring forgotten spaces can teach us more about ourselves. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about what exploring abandoned places really means, what draws certain people to do this, what keeps us coming back, what we're actually looking for when we step through a broken doorway and into someone else's silence. And the more I've sat with it, the more I've realized that this has never just been about the places. It's more so about what they awaken in us. So today I want to talk about that. About what urbex really means, about why so many of us romanticize ruin, about the architecture of grief, the intimacy of what gets left behind, and about why this strange little corner of the world can feel so healing for the people who are truly called to it. With all that said, I think that this episode is probably the beginning of a slight shift, not just in the way I talk about urbex, but maybe in the way that I understand it. Because for a long time, and like a lot of people, I understood urban exploration in the most obvious way first, as exploration and as adrenaline, curiosity, trespassing, and as climbing through broken windows and slipping quietly through the places that the world has already decided are no longer worth looking at. And on the surface, I think that is what it is, but lately, I have been realizing that urban exploration is so much more layered than that. And honestly, the inspiration behind this episode came from something super simple. If you follow me on Instagram, then you know that recently I made 2 new friends in this community. Well, I shouldn't say made 2 new friends because we've been friends, but I met 2 new friends. We met in person finally. And in the middle of getting to know them, and exploring together, swapping stories, learning how each other moves through a place, and even enduring police together. It just kind of cracked something open in me because there is nothing quite like standing in the middle of an abandoned place with other people, adrenaline running high, trying to stay calm, while your fate is in the hands of law enforcement. So that can really show you who people really are. And there's also nothing quite like walking through silence with people to show you who they are either. And I think that's what hit me, is that urbex has never just been about exploring the places. It's just as much about the people that you walk through them with. And even deeper than that, it's about who you become while you're exploring. Because urban exploration teaches you how to read a room. And I don't just mean that in the physical sense, not just physically or structurally, or how to decipher what your next step should be. It teaches you how to slow down. And that sounds super simple, but it isn't, at least not for me. If you know me, if you know, you know. But most people move through the world, consuming it very quickly, passively, without really seeing it. And I think that urbex asks something different of you. It teaches observation, not just looking, but observing. And that difference does matter because looking is passive and observation is participation. To observe a place is to notice how time behaves inside it, to notice what settled, what shifted, what was touched last, what was left untouched for years. And in learning how to observe a place, you start learning how little attention most people actually give their own lives, me included. I'm sure all of us are guilty of that. But it teaches you how to read energy and how to read silence, how to read people, how to read yourself. It makes you aware of your surroundings. And more importantly, it makes you aware of who surrounds you, who stays calm, who panics, who leads, who listens, who respects the place, who rushes through it, who sees it, who wants to be seen in it. I think that may be one of the clearest lessons that urbex offers, is that presence and performance are not the same thing. And some people enter a place to experience it, and some people enter a place to extract from it. And those are two very different ways of moving through the world, because I think one teaches reverence and the other teaches consumption, and only one of them leaves room for connection. So that distinction, I think, matters way more than people talk about. Because urbex is one of the only things I've ever known that can feel like a playground for adults. I think I've said that on here before, but I genuinely feel like urban exploration and just the act of exploring and the fun parts of it, it does make it all feel like a playground for adults, but with far more depth than that phrase even allows. Because it's very freeing and it's instinct and wonder. And I think for those of us who are a little bit older and started exploring in our youth, exploring feels like tending to the parts of ourselves that were once young enough to believe that the world was still worth discovering. And there's something so deeply childlike about that. And maybe that's part of why it feels so restorative, because for most people, adulthood becomes an exercise in disconnection. We stop wandering, we stop wondering, we stop touching the world with curiosity, and we start moving through it with obligation. And exploration interrupts that. It returns us to attention, to instinct, to play, to presence. And there is something profoundly healing about remembering what it was like to embrace wondering before needing to be productive. You know, the curiosity, the climbing, the dirt on your hands, the need to know what's behind the next door, and the refusal to leave the unknown alone. But unlike childhood, it now comes with awareness because we're adults. So now it comes with a slight bit of consequence, I'll call it. But it's more so with reverence and with mortality and with grief and with perspective. And I think that's where the healing really hides in exploring these places, at least for me. Because, of course, there is adrenaline and there is the thrill and it's risky and there's always the possibility of being caught, and there's a whole lot of uncertainty and a whole lot of rush. But I don't know, the adrenaline has never been the point. It's been the fun part. And it's like the built-in passenger. That's the fun passenger. But the real journey is something much quieter than that. I think the real journey is connection, and not just connection to place, but more so to impermanence and to perspective and to history, to each other, and to the understanding that every place is just like every person. It holds layers that we cannot understand at a glance. And that's what urbex has taught me best: how to approach things with more patience, how to let something reveal itself before deciding what it is. And I think the people who are truly called to explore abandoned places feel that. Not the people chasing content, not the people chasing clout, not the people who would stop the second that no one was watching. I mean the people who would still do this if there were no photos to post, no videos to edit, no audience to perform for, nothing to monetize on, no one waiting to validate what they found. Because those are the people I trust. No offense to anyone. And I think we know that. That's clear. Because those are the people I know feel what I feel when I walk into a place like that. And what I feel is not necessarily excitement first. It's recognition. It's a strange kind of peace coupled with urgency. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, but it isn't, because it's peace because something in you settles the moment you step inside. And it's urgency, not just because you're in there illegally and you need to get the fuck out, but because everything in that space is reminding you that none of this lasts. And that what life has always been is what life will always be. That time doesn't stop for anyone, and that every room you enter was once ordinary to someone, and that every hallway was once crossed half asleep, and every dish was put away without a second thought, and every photograph was once recent, every bed was once slept in, every home was once alive, enough to know that no one inside could imagine its silence now. And part of what stays with me the most is the intimacy of what gets left behind, like photographs, dishes, and cabinets, shoes by the bed, children's toys, half-folded clothes, calendars still pinned to walls, birthday cards, hairbrushes, medicine bottles, you name it, letters no one meant for strangers to read. Just these little tiny bits and tiny evidence of ordinary life. And that is always what hits the hardest. It's not the architecture or the decay or not even the scale of abandonment. It's the evidence of routine. And routine is easy to underestimate because it rarely feels important while we're living in it. But routine is where life is built. It's not just in the milestones or major events or in the moments we think will define us. It's built in repetition. Life is built in these ordinary mornings and familiar gestures and in the quiet rituals we perform so often that we forget that they are the architecture of a life. And I think that's why abandoned places feel so intimate, because they are like these museums of the ordinary. Because like I said, routine is where life actually happens, and abandoned places are foolproof that life is almost always made of these unremarkable things that we never realize are sacred until they're gone, or until you're standing in an abandoned place and you're seeing them. And I think that's what makes these places feel so personal. It's not just looking at ruin. You're looking at interruption, at paused lives, at unfinished sentences, evidence that someone was here and then suddenly they weren't. And that, more than anything, is why so many of us romanticize ruin. Not because we're obsessed with broken things, but because ruin is honest. And honesty is part of what makes it beautiful. Not beauty in the polished sense, but in truth. In a world consumed with, modification, abandoned places remain so raw and so unedited. At least in real time. I'm not talking about after they've been posted on the internet. But what I'm saying is that they don't hide what time has done to them. And there's something deeply, deeply human in that. Because ruin doesn't pretend, and it doesn't perform, and it doesn't polish itself for comfort. It tells the truth plainly. You really get that something happened here, something mattered here, and something ended here. And it just makes me think that abandoned places mirror something that most people spend their lives trying to avoid looking at directly. At least the people who don't go out and explore them, obviously. And I think that thing most people avoid trying to look at is loss. Not just death, but loss in all forms. The loss of time, of youth, of who we were, and the loss of what people thought would last. The loss of people, of homes, of certainty, of versions of ourselves that we never got to become. And I think that's why some places feel super familiar, even when they shouldn't, because grief has architecture too. Grief behaves a lot like abandoned places do. It settles slowly, and it changes the shape of familiar things. It leaves certain rooms untouched, and it collapses others entirely. And just like a neglected structure, it doesn't just vanish instantly. It simply learns how to exist in quieter ways. And it reshapes what once was familiar until you can still recognize it, but you can no longer return to it as it was. And that's grief. But that's also abandonment. It's not this ending all at once. It's like a slow unraveling, a gradual yielding, a place learning how to exist after being left behind. And I think that mirrors being human, because we're all kind of in some way learning how to live through what has left us. We're all carrying old versions of ourselves, and we're all grieving something, a person, a place, a time, a self. And that's what makes urban exploration feel so strangely intimate. Because sometimes it feels less like entering someone else's story and more like stumbling into your own through different walls. And that's just a reminder that none of us are separate from this. None of us are separate from time or loss or change or endings. And I think that's the lesson in all of it. Not just that life ends, but because it does, it asks something of us. To pay attention, to be here while we are here, to stop treating life like something waiting to begin, to stop postponing joy, to stop withholding tenderness, to stop assuming there will always be more time, to stop worshiping permanence in a world built entirely on change. Because in the end, every abandoned place says the same thing, which is live now. Not later, not when it's easier, not when you're less afraid or when the timing is better or you've become someone else. Now. And I think that's such a true gift that urbex gives us, is not the photos and not the stories, not the thrill, not even the places, but the perspective, the reminder, the privilege of standing inside what remains and being reminded that you're still here. You're still breathing, still becoming, still capable of wonder, still capable of change. And yeah, the meaning of life may just be simpler than we make it, And I think that may be to simply be here fully and to notice and to feel and honor what was and love what is and leave with less than you came with, except perspective. And to make something beautiful and meaningful of the time that you were given. Because, I don't know, I think that's just what life is all about. And I think it's just so great that there's this thing out there that exists, like urbex, that gives us such a clear, or it can if you're looking at it from the right viewpoint like I do. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. That sounded awful. But I think if you're more deeply connected to the experience that you're having when you're exploring and when you're actually going through these places, whether that's been your perception the whole time or you're gonna do that now because you're listening to this episode and you are like, oh shit, I have never thought about all this. Maybe think about that and think about how lucky we are to do what we do. And I know it's illegal, so don't come for me about how I'm out here bragging about some crazy shit. I know. You don't gotta remind me. But there is a reason it exists. And I think that reason is all of what I just said. There's just so much growth that can come from doing what we do. If you're doing it the right way, like I said, and if you're doing it for different reasons than just content. And no shade to those who do. Everyone has their own journey with urbex, why they do it, how they do it, whatever. All I'm saying is that I just find so much meaning in it, and I want to make sure I convey that here, because I can't forget to really show up in the space and be who I really am and be authentic. And yeah, so I just wanted to let you guys into a different side of me, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. With all of that said, and before I end this episode, I just want to say how deeply grateful I am to the friends that I've made in this community. Thank you for everything, the conversations, the trust, the laughter, the stillness, and the stories, and more importantly, for the shared understanding that this has always been about more than what we find. So yeah, thank you for reminding me that sometimes the most meaningful part of this is not the place, but it's who stands beside you in it. And to everyone listening and supporting this podcast, sharing these stories, and finding something of yourselves in them too, thank you, because stories like these do matter, and they matter so much more when they are heard. And if abandoned places teach us anything, it's that being witnessed matters. So I appreciate you guys for witnessing this and for being here. And again, thank you for listening. And if this episode resonated with you, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts. You can find me over on Instagram and TikTok at urbex echoes, and on Facebook at Echoes of Elsewhere, where I share all of my explorers, stories, and all the things in between. As all of you know, your support means more than you can imagine. So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the podcast if you aren't already. Leave a rating if you haven't already, please. And share it with someone who understands the true meaning of what's left behind in these places. Or maybe someone who needs to understand. Anyways, I will be back in 2 weeks. Until then, keep exploring the allure in the abandoned, the beauty of decay, and the echoes of elsewhere.